Hey there, it's Ms. Pepper. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what you should have read in Chapter 18, Section 2 last night, and what we're going to be looking at this week as we do some data analysis. So we're talking about new nation states from the old Soviet Union, and from 1945 to 1990, as you know, the Soviet Union was considered one of two world superpowers, and we know this because of both the arms race, the nuclear arms race, as well as the space exploration, which we discussed last year in the Cold War in Europe. But in 1999, the Soviet Union collapsed and became 15 separate independent nation states. So we're going to be examining why this would have happened. Why would one of the world's largest superpowers have been deemed unsuccessful or a failed state? To do this, first you have to understand what makes a nation successful. And generally, there's an understanding that there are 5 characteristics that you need: security, political freedom, economic growth, quality of life, and national unity. So what each of these items means is being secure. Your people and land must be safe and secure. So internally, you're free from crime. You don't have to worry that someone's going to break into your house. And externally or internationally, your borders need to be secure. So we have a military to keep us from being invaded or overrun by other nations or groups. Political freedom has to do with the choice of your own government structure. And to have political freedom, you have to give your consent. And that does need to be freely given consent, not consent that was forced by fear or power. So usually this has to do with your elections, your government, and while there are a variety of government structures, the most important thing is that the people themselves choose to be a part of that government structure. Economic growth has to do with the resources that you have available and that you're using those resources to promote improvements in the economy. More people with jobs, more people who are able to earn a living and provide for their families. Quality of life seems simple, making life better, but these are the things that often in developed countries people take for granted, like clean water, clean food sources, medical care, but then also things like education, entertainment, things that make you want to get up and live life every day. National unity is also a pride and loyalty in your country. The idea that you appreciate the benefits of living in your country enough that you feel pride, want to wave the flag, celebrate the holidays, and support your country in whatever endeavors it undertakes. So there's an organization called Freedom House, and they rank countries based on how free they are. And they do look at 2 different types of rights in order to determine whether a country is free, partly free, or unfree. They're going to look at political rights. Again, this is your ability to vote or run for office in an election. And then also civil rights. Do you have freedoms to speak your mind, publish literature, worship as you'd like, travel where you would like, have the opportunities for education, and those types of quality of life measures. So let's look at the Soviet Union then and what happened in those years of being a superpower. In terms of security, we read previously about the NKVD and the secret police force that actually made people feel less safe because there was always a fear of being spied on or turned in to a group that could possibly have you arrested or sent off to a prison camp. Also, just the intensity of being in a constant struggle with another superpower in the Cold War and the nuclear threat that was always ever present. In terms of political freedom, the Soviet Union for many years was ruled by dictators who tended to take power by force and used fear tactics in order to secure the consent of the people at gunpoint. Economic growth. Unfortunately, again, during the Soviet times, there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of poor land management with some of the collective farms. And so the actual economic growth for the country was very stagnant. For many people, it fell or rose only very slightly. In terms of quality of life, people often had a need for those basic survival items, but then you had famine, you had drought, you had intense poverty, long lines and things that were very difficult for people to secure basic access to those daily needs. And finally, national unity. In the Soviet era, the idea was for everyone to be equal. And this also meant be equal in terms of your culture. And Soviet culture was manufactured by everyone having to give up any personal identity and become part of the commune and the communal nation. And so many of the smaller ethnic groups, remember the Uzbeks, the Kazakhs, the Tajiks, those ethnic groups often felt like they were discriminated against and persecuted based on their beliefs, which then created resentment towards the national identity, and that resentment never really went away. So now that the Soviet Union is no more, and we're looking at a couple of decades worth of data, your responsibility is going to be to highlight these new nation states of Central Asia. And we're going to be doing this through a brand new athletic event, which is a takeoff of the Olympics, and it's going to be called the Geo Games. And you are going to be making some recommendations. After you do some background reading and research, you're going to have the opportunity to recommend to the Geo Games Committee which nation state from the former Soviet Union you would most recommend as a host for the Geo Games. And you're going to do this through some careful data analysis. And when you do data analysis, you're going to have a lot of statistics. You're going to be looking at numbers that are going to reflect those 5 qualities of a successful nation state. And then, once you see some trends, whether quality of life is improving or whether economic growth is declining, when you see those trends, you'll be able to use those statistics to make those recommendations for a country that has achieved success independent of the Soviet Union, or countries that are still struggling and potentially could not be able to create a safe and secure environment to host a games like the Geo Games.